Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Dan Lowenstein. I'm the Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost here at UCSF, and it is a pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce today's speaker. The room is just filled with love, and I think that really is an indication of the experience that we're about to have. So I'm supposed to say that Mike McCune is a professor of medicine and chief of division of experimental medicine at the University of California. I'm supposed to tell you about the fact that he got his initial degree at Harvard and then went on to Rockefeller University, and then he started companies, and he's done amazing things in AIDS, and that he is a mentor known to so many people, and on and on and on and on and on. But that is not why we're here today. We're here because Mike has accomplished an extraordinary feat that he's going to tell us about. But I want to give you just a little bit of additional background. So Mike and I are good friends, like the friendships that he has with so many other people in this room. Ours goes back to the formation of the UCSF CTSI, when Mike was chosen as the PI, and there was a small leadership group that worked closely with him, and I was privileged to be a member of that quartet. And that was the beginning of what is a lifelong friendship. So Mike and I have been hanging out. We go out to have coffee every couple months, catch up on life. And it was about 2 years ago that we were sitting at the cafe, and we were sort of sharing, what's going on in life. And he said, "Hey, by the way, I actually, beyond Karen and my girls, I actually haven't told anybody else this yet, maybe just 1 or 2 people, but I think I'm going to try to hike the Pacific Crest Trail." Now, one of the reasons that Mike shared that with me, besides, the friendship, was he knew that my wife, Milo, who's here, and I had hiked a component of the PCT, a very short part called the John Muir Trail, a couple summers previously. A little more than 200 miles, but typically takes a total of about 21 days. And he knows that I've done quite a bit of wilderness travel and climbing and so forth. So part of the discussion was, what do I need to do to prepare for this? And I was delighted that he'd shared this with me, and I was very much looking forward to the conversation. But I had to start by saying, Mike, how much experience have you had with hiking and backpacking? And we all know he's physically active. He runs all over the damn place in San Francisco. He's always been that way. But I just asked him, and I was startled when he said, well, not too much. That's why I'm asking you for some help. I said, Mike, how much have you actually backpacked? And it turns out that at that point, and tell me if I've got this wrong, Mike, I think in total, in terms of true backpacking, that is getting out of your car, putting on a backpack, and then hiking a distance, and actually camping out overnight, it was, with appropriate gear, it was about a total, with Karen, 15 miles and 1 night out. So all of you who have experience with actual camping out and backpacking probably would feel the same way I did, which was, this is not going to go well. You have so much work to do, and that's actually what our conversation was. I tried to talk him into actually hiking the John Muir Trail first, or at least doing maybe a 4 to 5 day backpacking trip to sort of get things down, and he seemed to understand that. But but as we kept meeting, I asked him for updates, and he says, "Yeah, I'm starting to figure out what I need to take." And, "Well, have you camped out much?" "No, it's been too busy." And I don't think he actually ever did much additional backpacking until he started out at the Mexican border last April. So doing the PCT, regardless of your background, is an amazing, amazing accomplishment. And don't go buy the movie or the book Wild to get a sense of what it really is. It's an extraordinary achievement. And Mike will tell you a little bit about the cohort of people who attempt it and why they succeed or not. But to, in addition, do it given the limited experience that Mike brought into it continues to just stagger me. But as I've reflected on it, once I heard the good news that he finished, it's just no surprise That's just the kind of person Mike is. So with that, Mike, we're looking forward to your talk.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I love you. And thanks for hosting this today, and Yosipa and your staff for having the hiker food out there. It's going to be different than most of the academic lectures I'm used to and you're used to. No hypotheses, no experiments, no data, no notes for you all. I do want to tell you about the trail. I want to tell you what it is, why I wanted to do it, how I did it with Dan's help and the help from many others, what I saw, who I met, what I learned. Just sit back. It's going to be a bit of a travel log. It's been hard to put together. I've been back now since September. And I had an initial rush of excitement being back home, and now I'm remembering all the great things that I saw, and I'm going to show you some of them. It's impossible to show you the whole trail, so you're going to get just little, soupçon of trail. But if any of you, and I think one of the reasons I really want to do this is that I was just floored by the magnificence of the experience, not of the sights, but of the experience. And I think all of you and others need to take parts of it. You don't need to do the whole thing. I would recommend not to do the JMT, just for starters, because it's actually quite rigorous if you haven't worked up to it. But I'll tell you now, just so you know, if you're ever interested in learning more, let me know, because I'll talk and talk and talk and more. So just by way of orientation, this is it. It's a trail that starts in Mexico and goes up to Canada. It passes through, on the spine of those mountains, the Sierras, through the Cascades, wonderful national parks and state parks and wilderness areas. It's long, and 2656 plus or minus. It goes up and down a bunch of passes and gaps, lots of feet up, down, that I didn't actually know about when I started. I thought that the southern part across the desert, they said, would be sort of, Sahara, Lawrence of Arabia, but it's not. That's what it looks like. And that one up and down is San Jacinto, 8,000 feet down, the most down of a face in the mainland North America, coming down near Palm Spring, up into the high Sierras, which is where Dan was hiking, where you every day get to go up one of these magnificent mountain peaks, into Northern California, which is not shabby at all, with Lawson and Shasta and the Trinity Alps, into Oregon, which is thought to be flat. That's the way people talk about it, but actually each of those bars is 1,000 feet, so it's a fair amount of up and down. And then finally into Washington State, the best kept secret. I mean, people in Seattle know all about it, which has actually got more up and down than any of the previous parts that I just showed you. It was the idea of Catherine Montgomery, a school teacher in 26, that something like this could happen. And a fellow named Clinton Clark in the 30s actualized it by teaming up with Ansel Adams and the Boy Scouts and the YMCA to ask the question, could they collaboratively put together trails that were already there in Washington and Oregon and California? It was brilliant. And patch them together in such a way that it would be continuous. And they actually sent these troops out, Boy Scout troops. Figured if they could do it, anybody could do it, or like me, for instance. And they found ways to patch the trails together, hypothetically. And then over the next decades, they began to do this. They began to, on their own, with a little bit of government help, begin to actually put the trails together. As I'll tell you later, it was sanctioned by the government in '68. It finally opened in '91. And parts of it are still being built. But it's by and large, passable most of the way. Even before it was finished in '72, there was the first verified through hike. Somebody actually had, in 2004, the gumption to do what's called a yo-yo. I met somebody that did this. You go up and then you go down in one season. 2014 was a big year. The youngest hiker, age of 6, did it. Anish, Heather Anderson, shown here, did it as the fastest unsupported through hike. What that means is that she did everything on her own. She carried her food. When she needed to get off trail, she walked off trail to the nearest town, came back, and she did it in a mere 60 days. But she was beaten by this guy, McCone, who was supported at 53 days. By contrast, or just by reference, I guess, it normally takes about 5 to 6 months, 150 to 180 days to complete. It took me about 160, so that's fast. There's actually been also a through ride. This is Midnight Rider. Actually, I got to meet her in Shelter Cove in Seattle. She took her horse Valentino from Mexico to Canada in 2013, and the last 60 miles, they ran into all sorts of snow. It took her 30 days to do those 60 miles because she had to go out and shovel the snow for her horse each day. And she told me that was an ignoble way to finish. And she decided not to leave it to rest. And so she went back the next year, 2014, with the same horse, the same thing, and she finished it then. It was amazing. The trail has become more and more popular over the years. This is a graph of the number of finishers. Usually about a third of those that start finish. So maybe 500 or 600 people were walking, and until the book and then the movie that Dan mentioned, Wild, came out, and there was a spike that went up. About 1,500, 2,000, again, about a third finish. That's not why I wanted to walk the trail. I mean, I wasn't having a midlife crisis or wanting to find truth. It was actually something which I've been wanting to do since 1968. Okay, so I'm an old fart. I was 14 at the time then. I was younger. And I was in Chicago. I was politically active. I was working in Bobby Kennedy's presidential campaign. I was in Grant Park when us, got to put LSD into the Democratic National Convention's water supply. Yes. I was waiting for 4 years for my draft number so I could visit Canada. This was where I was at. And it was a horrible year. Those of you old enough, and I know some of you are here are old enough to know, that this was the year when the Tet Offensive began and the Vietnam War went to hell in a handbasket. This is the year when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and cities across the United States just erupted in protest and flames, literal flames. And this, of course, also is the year when Bobby was shot. And amidst all of this, there was one ray of light. Okay, so I did not watch TV much then, now, whenever. Back then, again, for those of you old enough to remember, there were 5 channels. I was watching one of them and then the other and then the next, trying to avoid the visage of the person that was on all channels, and that was Lyndon Baines Johnson, who I never liked to watch because he always had bad news to talk about from the Vietnam War. But this particular night, October 2nd, 1968, he actually had just signed the National Trails Act, which is one of the other glorious pieces of legislation that he alone was able to pass. And in this pronouncement, he was talking very uncharacteristically, almost poetically, about what this would do. And the National Trails Act actually sanctified and conserved for the future 9, and now it's been, I think, 13 different national trails, of which the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail are 2. And he talked about the PCT. And he was talking about how it would go from Mexico to Canada and go through these soaring mountains with clouds and, snow and visions along the way. And it was just mesmerizing. And I fell in love with the idea of doing it and said, someday I'm going to do that. I would talk about it from time to time with people who I know and loved. I told Karen, my wife, Karen K. Smith was her name back then, when she was my girlfriend, in '76 that I was going to do it. And I'm quite sure she didn't believe that I was going to do it. We talked about it, and I'm sure she didn't remember after those years. But finally, in the fall of 2013, around the time that, I guess it was maybe that year, maybe the year after, I'm not sure, Dan. I guess it was that year that I decided that I was going to do it. And I told KK again I was going to do it. She finally got the message that it was going to happen, and she put the kibosh on it and said that there was no way that she wanted me to do it that particular year because we were living in a cavernous house without the girls, and it was not in her idea of a good time to be in that house for 6 months while I was out traipsing around in the woods. So she convinced me to wait for a year, which was good. We got to sell the cavernous old house and move to a place near Mount Zion, which we rented, where she could walk to work, and that was good. We jettisoned a lot of stuff as well, which became kind of a harbinger of things to come as I narrowed my total pack weight down to 20 pounds, as I'll tell you later. I had the opportunity to, at the cavernous old house, before we sold it, we had a party for the division where I work. I invited everybody over, and I said I had an announcement to make, and I actually gave a riddle, which you can read, about what I was going to do next year. And I invited them to guess what it was that I was going to do. And everybody thought it was an April Fool's joke, but Charlie Kim, who was another great stalwart maybe here. And a great outdoorsman. Oh, there he is. Charlie Kim figured it out. You figured it out wrong. You thought I was going to go on the Pacific Crest Trail from north to south as opposed to south to north, but you got it. And it was not a joke. It was going to happen. And then finally, on the 12th of April, I started. I want to talk a little bit about how I got to start, because I do want you all to realize that you too can do this, okay? So I'm going to walk through what I had to do in order to do it. It took longer to figure out how to do what I was going to do than to do it, okay? But it's doable. Okay, so the first thing I figured was that I was going to come back, and I didn't want to leave the things that I was doing sort of at ends where they would not be successful. So I asked a lot of friends and trusted colleagues if they could help me to continue those things as I was gone. And some, but not all of them are here, but I just want to give a shout out to all of them if I can. So Cheryl Stoddard assumed my role as the Division Chief of Experimental Medicine. I thank her for that. Peter Hunt took over my lab and helped to mentor people in my lab during the time that I was gone. Sharon Lewin, who's actually in Melbourne, Steve Deeks, Jay Ryan, Trevor Burt, and Louise Swainson took over various roles that I had as a PI or as a co-PI on various grants from the NIH and elsewhere. Paul Baum took over my clinic and took good and loving and probably better care of my patients there than I would have been able to do. And Jackie Maurer actually took over some important committee duties that needed to be tended to during that time. In the division itself, I have this amazing staff, Peggy Wykes, Susan Lau, and Maxine Cooper, who as they always have done, took care of the way that the division would work during the time that I was gone. So thank you all for allowing me to take this time off. I really appreciate it. Me, as ignorant as I was, I needed to learn, so I waded through all sorts of stuff. I read every book I could get about the Pacific Crest Trail, including books that were called Pacific Crest Trail, but also books that said things like, "Do not die on the mountain." Which, yeah, so I read all that stuff, and this was a lot, but this was nowhere near the amount which I will invite you to visit that's found on the web. So, there's all sorts of websites where you can go to learn about what the trail is and what the experiences are and how to do what you need to do, including things like, packing your pack. I learned a lot from Dan and from Charlie on this, and I put together a pack which had all this stuff, which you don't need to read, but I can show you sometime. And it looks like this on the floor, and it looks like this, when it's not on the floor, but in the bag. Altogether about 35 pounds. Much better than all the stuff that was in the cavernous old house. But still way too much. That was winnowed down to about 25 pounds eventually, depending on how much water I had to carry. Preparing physically, I did really want to go do the JMT. People walk around sometimes with packs on their back, 30, 40 pounds in the city to get ready. I was busy, you're right. And I did have the hubris of previous training. Like I have run since '68, 5-10 miles a day, day in, day out, and I've run a bunch of marathons and finished them and loved them. And I thought I had the things that you needed in order to hike, like stamina, like patience, and like the ability to walk with myself for 5 or 6 hours or more a day and not drive myself crazy. Those are the 3 things you need, okay, aside from a pack, in order to walk the PCT. All of this was good, but then what happened, and so listen carefully for those of you who think that you're not enough in shape to do this. In 2010, as I was running, minding my own business, I had this acute pain in my right knee, which did not go away, as normally those pains would do. And so eventually I went to visit Anthony Luke, who is a god of sports orthopedics here, and I asked him what the problem was, and he took an MRI, which looked like this, and he found, for those of you who are not looking at MRIs, this area that's circled, which is a stress fracture of my medial femoral condyle, important part of the bone of my right knee, and it was bad. And the reason it was bad is because the cartilage that normally separates the upper part of the knee from the lower part of the knee was totally gone after all those years of running, getting me in shape, and not doing it correctly. So he said, "You cannot run again." and I didn't tell him I was going to walk the PCT, I'm sure he would have not given me good doctorly advice on that. And I refused to hear that, and I asked him if he could help me to retrain my gait. And so for those of you who may need to retrain your gait, I can show you. For those of you who may just need to have another 20 years on your knee, I can show you that too. But I basically learned all about barefoot running and chi running, which essentially is a way to handle your lower extremities in ways that they don't self-implode. Anthony put me on this other gizmo. It's called an Ultra G. It's a treadmill. It allowed me to offload my weight so I could run without pain. And I changed the mechanics of my running so that rather than putting all the weight on the medial aspect of my knee, remember there was no cartilage, I put it on the lateral aspect of the knee where there was a little bit. So I learned how to do that. I eventually got to the point where I could run again without pain, and I went back to the thing which I really love to do, which is the New York Marathon, and started training for it. But just before that, I injured a muscle in my right calf. It's called the gastrocnemius. I rested it because I really wanted to run that. My daughter Emma was running it at that time. It would have been my first run with her. And we started off at the starting line, and I could only go about 20 yards. I had to stop. I had to walk across the Tappan Zee Bridge. I was the last of 70,000 runners. I had to get on the subway and take the subway up to Central Park. It was really bad. So I rested it. I didn't do anything. That's why I didn't walk the JMT. I couldn't walk. I got to the point where I could finally walk, and I was walking. I was at SFGH, and I was walking to a meeting that Sue Carlisle, my beloved dean there, was holding, and I tripped on stairs, and actually I came down really hard, and I ruptured it this time. This is in the February of 2015, blood, the whole 9 yards, and that looked bad, right? Because I was going to start 2 or 3 months later. I went to the goddess and the god, respectively, of physical therapy here at UCSF. Should you ever have a problem, go to Nancy Beal and go to Krista Prado. And they put me through what they called an aggressive physical therapy program. And they brought me back to really to the place where I could both walk with my knee not hurting so much, and I could walk without my muscle not hurting so much. A little bit, but good enough. And there was no physical training during this time because, like I said, I couldn't walk. If you start the trail, you will get in shape, I guarantee you. And then there was this, Dan, actually the episode to which you referred of my first camping episode, that was actually then. And the reason we did 10 miles, Karen and I hobbled over to the state parks in Sonoma, which I trust you might see at some point, and they're beautiful. And we had all of our camping gear, including this fancy Z-Pack tent that weighed about 1 ounce. And we set it up on a crystal clear night. And we woke up in the morning drenched with the condensation that came from the tent. And I wrote this polite email to Dan saying what to do about wet. And characteristically, within half an hour, he'd responded and said, don't worry, it's okay, no problem. And you taught me how to deal with wet, basically by getting ready to that tent and getting another, which was quite good. They finally got to the first day. KK and I took a plane and then a car out to Campo, which is right at the Mexican border. This is the fence that the Donald wants to have Mexico rebuild. It's pretty much of a wasteland. This is me at the so-called southern terminus with this nifty cap that my lab gave me with all of their pictures on it. I loved it. We started out together, and KK walked with me for the first 3 miles, at which point we hugged goodbye. But before she left, you'll recall that you stopped and came back to me and said, you're not really accustomed to doing what you're going to do. So what you should do is if ever you sit down or go into bushes, you take your poles and make sure that, and scream to make sure that you scare the snakes away. That, she said, is what we do in Canada. I've written about this. It's on a blog. It's on this website. It was, I have to give a shout out to my childhood buddy, Mike Landers, who actually orchestrated it. And there's a lot more information there if you ever wish to go online and read it. But let me just show you now a bunch of pictures of what I saw. The first thing is the trail. I mean, it's just a work of art. It's one of the man-made wonders of the world. It's wide, about 2 feet. It's beautifully cured by hundreds of footsteps. It's got hedges on the side, which it took me about 200 miles to figure out those were formed by the poles of people hiking, right? So it's really man-made. It sometimes is covered by snow, although in our year, thankfully, not so much. It sometimes is overgrown. In northern Washington State, there are places that are totally inaccessible where it's overgrown. But oftentimes you run into things like this, in the middle of nowhere, staircases that are built. In a falls that's in northern Oregon that I'd invite you to visit, the trail's cut into the side of the cliff and then built behind the waterfall so you don't have to get wet as you go through it. And I don't know if you can see this, but rather than like the Appalachian Trail to go straight up and straight down, there are these beautiful switchbacks that even horses can follow that go on forever, up to finally the reason why the trail is called the Pacific Crest Trail is that it rides on the crest. You're going flat, high up. It's like flying above the clouds sometime. Not too much work. It's just spectacular. The sites, obviously, this is Southern California, the sort of chaparral-covered mountains that are seen there. Even down there, though, up high in the San Bernardino Mountains, there was snow to wake up to. You get to places where these beautiful rock formations. This is the Vasquez Rock State Park. Get into the moonscape of the high Sierras. This is just over Glen Pass. This is coming down from Kings Canyon. Going up into Northern California, again, I mentioned, there's Lassen, but this is Shasta, magical mountain. Sometimes annular rings around it. It's supposed to be Martians that are there. Into southern Oregon, where there's the beauty of Crater Lake. Coming up into the northern part of Oregon, where the Cascade Range is just coming down, and there's the Sisters Range. It's just spectacular. And then after, seeing all of that, most of it as a flatlander from Chicago, totally mind-blowing, into Washington State, which is, as I said earlier, absolutely spectacular, with visions like this and like this and like this. Really amazing stuff. I expected, though, to see that kind of stuff. What I didn't expect to see, I'll just go through quickly, are the following. First, there's wildflowers everywhere. Everywhere. I took hundreds of pictures of wildflowers. Every time I saw a new wildflower, I would take a new picture. And sometimes they were ones that would be present, up and down the trail for maybe 100 miles or more. Usually, though, they were directly situated in a very unique ecosystem that might last for only 100 yards in some cases. And that's where they sit, and that's where they'll be, and that's why you won't see them for sale across the street here. They're just spectacular. Wildlife, not so much, but those that were there were totally tame, and I could sit and watch them forever. Deer, marmot, grouse, you name it. Water, in Southern California and Northern California, parts of Oregon, where there was very little of it, it became important to know exactly where water was. But once you got out of those places, it was everywhere. And especially after that drought land, to see it was spectacular. This is a lake up in the high Sierras. This is one of the many waterfalls that we came across. This is me in one of the pools in which I would jump. And then, to me, actually, the greatest, and this is in Northern California, worth a trip explicitly to see. When the miners went to go find gold in Numnar, they had to hike, and they hiked along what is now the PCT. And to find water, which they needed, they dug holes. Don't ask me how, but they found places where they would dig a hole in the middle of a cliff with a pipe. And they would hit water, and the water would come out, and that's what they drank, and that's what we would drink. We'd come across the pipe spring. We would look forward to coming across the pipe spring to this wonderful, cool, clear, we didn't have to filter it, water. It was like, having a tap in the middle of nowhere. Every night, there were sunsets. We see sunsets here, it's okay. But the nights that are there and the sunsets that I saw were absolutely spectacular. Another part about the trail that's fun for those of you who are gamers is that it is like a chess game. You have to strategize, and that's kind of fun. I don't know how people did this in the past to figure out, what they would eat, when they would eat it, where they would get water, where they would go off trail to get more of the food that they would need to eat. All this stuff is like the logistics of the trail, and it's, like I say, it's a game. It's fun. I don't know how they did it before, but the way that it is done now is to have an iPhone, thank you Steve Jobs, onto which you put stuff, apps. One was the Craig's PCT planner, which some of you know, in which you can, I'm sure you can't see this, but you can put in how many miles you want to walk a day, or I'm sorry, how fast you want to walk. In my case, in the beginning, it was 2 miles per hour, which all of you can do. Later, it was more like 3 miles per hour. How many hours per day you might want to walk, and this one I put in, it was 7 hours. I figured that was the max. Eventually, it was 12. And then how much you wanted to handicap yourself when you went up hills. And Craig's planner would then take all that and tell you exactly how long it would take to go between point A and point B, which was good for planning if you wanted to figure out, how much food you needed to carry. There's this brilliant hiker, Half Mile, who's actually GPS mapped the entire trail, and he goes back and fixes the coordinates and makes them better each year, so that you can download his app on your iPhone and know exactly where you are with the satellites right on your iPhone as you're walking on the trail. And then there's points that are marked on this app that tells you where there's water, where there's landmarks, where there's towns, where there's roads. More visually, Guthooks has come up with an app that shows you how much up you're going to do, which is good just psychologically, I think, to know. And then, not least, there's this important app called the Water Report, which is upgraded every couple weeks, that tells you exactly where water can be found. I loaded this primarily. I don't know if Terry Liegler is here, but those of you who know her over at San Francisco General don't know that she has a sister named Tracker who's walked part of the trail, and mentioned in that last water report. And I stopped off at Tracker's house where she lives with her husband Lance, just on that face of San Jacinto, to eat literally all that food there except for the 2 salads on the side. They'd put out on the table for me. Thank them very much. So that I can talk a little bit about food. Okay, so food is, I don't know how many of you guys ate when you came in here. I was going to have hiker food, but food is really important, because you need now maybe, in our sedentary lives, maybe 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 calories a day. But the story that I heard as I got onto the trail was that I needed more like 5,000, maybe 4,000 calories a day. So I went out to Costco, which I actually love to do, and I bought all this stuff, dried this and dried that, and I brought it home. And I figured out how much I needed to put into a bag and how much I would eat each day and what the distance was. And I found out that I was actually amazed, almost like magical from God, that I could put that amount of food into one medium-sized USPS box, which would keep me for that period of time between the points. And I very methodically made this list of what the points were and where the boxes would go. And I did this from Southern California all the way up to Canada. And my wonderful wife, KK, agreed to somehow figure out how she would take the boxes from San Francisco and get them flown out to these resupply points. So this all sounded good. This took about a couple weeks to do. As soon as I got on the trail, it all went to hell. Because why? Because I got rapidly tired of the food. I also was so excited in the beginning that there was no way I could eat 5,000 calories a day. And I also realized I didn't want to carry 5,000 calories worth of food between point A if I give it to people. And so, what happened? What happened was I dropped weight. I went from 190 to 180 to 170 to 160 to the mid-150s. I have this belt. I still got it. It's right here. From high school, which you maybe cannot see, but I had to, maybe not, I had to put in 3 extra pegs on the belt so that I could tighten it up enough to keep my pants on. And, so 2 things happened. One was what I told would be happening to me, called hiker hunger. This is the state of being in which you do nothing but think, sleep, dream, and talk about food. And that any thru hiker will tell you is what you do and where you end up being. And then the second thing, which is a natural consequence of that, is that you fall in love and you become intimate with junk food. I'll point out the honey bun, 360 calories for 50 cents. Milkshakes, pizzas, you name it. There's a place on the trail, it's really funny, where you walk, and there's a sign there that you may not be able to see, but on the bottom it says that the next campground is 20-something miles away, which is good to know, right, because you're going to camp sometime. But then above that it says McDonald's, point 1. And there it is over there. And here we are. You may wonder why the table is empty. And for those of you who have never done this, I assure you that you'll enjoy doing it. Go to a McDonald's at 9:59 a.m. in the morning. That's what time this is. At 10 o'clock, the board flips from the breakfast food to the dollar meals. And you can then hoard the counter and get lots of dollar meals, that is cheap meals. So we down probably 40,000 calories in the next hour. My fave eventually, as I experimented back and forth, it took me the entire trail to figure out what I really liked. And this is what I like. It's a tortilla, with lots of cheese and salami. It's got a little bit of pepper here. Sometimes I would put mustard and hot sauce. It's got the bee and the dirt. Okay, it's okay. It's all good. But that I will. If you come to dinner at my house, I will make you these. Without the bee or the dirt. One question that I get often is, what did you do? With your time all the days and. Let me run you through that. I mean, I would wake up early. I normally wake up early, but on this trip, I would wake up early in order to listen to the birds, and I would lie for about half an hour just listening to the birds. I show this campsite because I also had frogs high up in the stairs, 11,000 feet. Birds and frogs in the morning. It was crazy. And I would start to walk. Usually, I was up early and starting to walk by 5:30. I would stop every couple hours for food. This is one of my other favorites. I would write it down. Kirkland's fruit and nut medley. I still like that stuff. And then around 8, after the birds had calmed down, I would don my headset and I would partake of one of the greatest gifts that I've ever received from Kevin Weil, who's sitting here, Lorraine Pearson's partner. Kevin and Lorraine are also aficionados of the Dead, of which I was not, but they've taught me to listen to the Grateful Dead, which I find is peaceful when running and walking. And Kevin, an IT geek, has actually put 2,400 of the 3,000 Dead concerts that exist onto MP3s, and he selected 250 of them for me, along with a bunch of Jerry Garcia Band concerts, and he loaded them onto my laptop. It says here it'll take me, if I listen 4.5 hours a day, 6 months to finish. So he timed it out completely. And this was just spectacular. I listened in chronology to the Dead from 65 up to 94. I'm probably the only person alive that's done that. And it was great. I would get off the trail usually around 6:30 or 7. Mountain House sweet and sour pork with rice, also a highlight you should write down. And then I would escape into my tent, the Big Agnes Fly Creek tent that Dan told me I should get. That was a really good suggestion. It has this fly so that it doesn't rain on you, but it also has a net at the top so you can look up at the sky and watch the stars and watch the mosquitoes outside the tent, which is a good thing. And I'd lie there with all of my stuff on the side and me on that beautiful yellow pad. It's 18 inches. In the beginning, I couldn't sleep on it, but eventually that air pad and me were, wedded together. It was fantastic. I normally don't sleep much at night, so I figured I'd be in the tent alone in the darkness for maybe 4 or 5 hours after that. So I asked all of my friends and buddies and family to send me the names of their favorite books, not the ones they thought that I would like, but the ones that they like. And I loaded them all into this so-called Kobo backlit reader. And I had them, hundreds of them, ready to read. Spectacular books. I have this list if anybody wants it, of books that I just have never had a chance to read before. And I did get through some of them, but I found that I was tired. So usually by 9 or 10 I'd fall asleep. The best part of the trail, I must say, the people that I met. Okay, as I said, maybe 1,500, 2,000 started, maybe 80% in the 20 to 35 age range, maybe the rest 55 and older, not much in between. People who were, fit enough to walk it, smart, articulate, interactive, open, really easy to get to know. Tremendous community of individuals that I'll never forget. It was pensioners sitting up here who had actually left his job at UC Davis as a microbiologist on April 1st and started walking his trail on April 3rd, I think. still teaching me about sulfur-fixing bacteria later on, but nonetheless pensioned from UC Davis. Hummingbird, who dressed like a hummingbird, was actually attacked by hummingbirds who thought that they were, she was invading their space, named Hummingbird. This is how they got their trail names. Pine Stick, who liked to walk with a pine stick. Barely, who is, I'll show you, saw a bear and stopped to take a picture of it. And so on. These people all became great friends. With respect to the names, I just as a non-secretary, I called myself Smokey, and I did that. I didn't have anybody else assign that to me. I took it in the beginning. KK actually knitted a nice cap for me that said Smokey, so that if people didn't know, they would know. And I did this actually in honor of my father, who was Joseph M. McCune, Jr., and didn't like to be called Jr., so he called himself Smokey. And he passed away a few years before I walked, and I did this in his memory. I thought if somebody came up with a better name, I would take it. Nobody did, and that was mine. There were other thru hikers that I met. This is Gene the Machine and Pebbles and Bam Bam. But there were some particularly memorable individuals, in this case family, the Ravens, Mama Raven and Papa Raven, who'd walked the trail in 2006 together, and then they grew up and they had kids, and this one kid, Bling Will, is his real name, was 13, Little Crow, 9-year-old June. They were walking together on the trail. Let's see. I have to show you this, if I can play this and you can hear it. Oh, goodness gracious.
There you go. You got it.
Do I?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Excuse me. Okay. Bye. Can you believe that? I loved it. I walked alone for 1,700 miles through most of California. I mean, I met people along the way, but I didn't really walk with people for a long time until I met these two, Half Slow and Legend. I just fell in love with these guys, and I walked with them on and off for the rest of the trail. Half Slow is this 62-year-old Vietnamese American who, property manager, actually from Santa Rosa, one of the most brilliant people I've ever met, and who learned when he left Vietnam in '75, right, when hell was breaking loose there, he learned English by learning poetry, and he knew everything, including all the poems from Blake to now about nature. And he would stop in the middle of nowhere and recite. And he had tried to walk the PCT 3 times previously and had failed, and his family finally said, to hell with this, and they hired this guy, Legend, to support him. He'd take a recreational vehicle and drive it from one part of the trail to another, 40, 50, 60, 90 miles up, in order to help Half Slow finish the trail. And I have to show you. This is Half Slow at the 2,000-mile mark. A group of us, it was in Oregon. We had stopped and we were celebrating the fact that we had reached 2,000 miles, and that was a perfect occasion for Half Slow to break into poetry. Listen
we went into the woods because we wish to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and to see what it has to teach, and not, when we came to die, discover that we have not lived. We did not wish to live what was not life, for living is so dear, nor did we wish to practice resignation. We wish to live deeply, to suck out the barrel of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life. So we wish to drive life into a corner and reduce it down to its lowest number. During the PCT, it is eat, sleep, and walk. After the PCT, it's eat, sleep, and play.
That's the kind of thing he would do. It was great. Then there was the Legend. So Legend, he was this 52-year-old guy who had walked the PCT 3 years previously, also supported by his family in this case, called the Legend because he had escaped from 3, or was it 4, it was 5, it didn't really matter. He would tell the story all the time, near-death experiences, who would not only support half-slow, but also act as a so-called trail angel for anybody else who came by and tell stories and be the font of information about whatever it was that you needed to know. And I captured a short segment of his wisdom here. Actually, he had borrowed it from another iconic thru hiker named Billy Goat, who had walked up and down the trail a number of times and is now working as a trail angel. And in this clip, he's talking about the 5 rules of the PCT. Okay, listen up.
Billy Goat says you live by these 5 rules on the trail. Rule number 1, never ever pass up a floating question. Number 2, never walk by a picnic table without sitting down. Number 3, if somebody offers you trail magic, food, or money, take it graciously because it makes them feel good about themselves, even if you don't need it. Number 4, if you get an opportunity for a warm shower, even if you just took one 5 minutes ago, take one now because you never know whether there's next one. And last but not least, just have as much fun as you can on the trail.
And this is the kind of stuff that would come out of his mouth, just non-stop. It was great. I was a pretty social being after that first 700 miles, with half-slow and Legend, but I was also blessed by the fact that a number of family and friends came by. So KK came by 4 times, actually. First around Yosemite, and then again at Donner, up again by the California-Oregon border, and then for several weeks, actually, in Washington State, which was great. And at Donner, she brought my daughter, Louise, who was great to see. Earlier, actually, down near L.A., where my daughter Emma goes to school, I got to see her and have her carry my pack for a bit. My buddy, who some of you I'm sure must know, Vishu Lingappa, and his wife Krista visited for a while in Oregon. Mary Keir and Mark Ansel also came up towards their stomping grounds near Mount Hood and walked with us for a while and pushed us along. And not least, Dan was there for a while. Not just this picture, but you can see him actually getting out of the car on the right up there at the top. He was looking for me along the road, I forget which route, and he saw this guy that looked like a homeless bum. And I had to wave to him to say, "That's me, Dan, I'm here." I'm sure you must wonder, because I know I did, and this was one of the trepidations I had when I started, that, what are the dangers of the trail? What do you have to worry about? And there is some stuff to worry about. There's poisonous stuff, all along the way. There's snakes and insects. There's this plant called the poodle dog bush, which is like, I guess, poison ivy on steroids. The trail moves around it in burned out areas when it's there. There's lightning, which is totally frightening, and starts wildfires, of which we had many, especially up in Washington State. Bears, I worried about. I actually had a bear can, which I had to eventually dispense because I began to learn that black bears are not dangerous at all. This is the bear that barely. He saw the bear on the trail and he stopped to bring out his camera and turn it on and let it warm up. And they took a picture. The guy that's got his name. And not long after that, we were just coming up to Kennedy Meadows, which is at the foothills of this high Sierras. And I was down below him, and he was up high with his photo lens, and he saw this bear running away from me. and took a shot. Now, most of the dangers were all avoidable. For me, the biggest problem it had to do with accidental falls, of which I took several. This one, see that bump on that log across that trail? I hit it as I was excitedly walking down to the half-mile mark and landed on my head and just about conked myself out. But other things like blisters because the shoes are not, right, or sunburns because you don't put on the right lotion, or dehydration because you don't drink enough water, etc. All that stuff is avoidable. Another problem, which is possibly avoidable, is psychological. They say you pack what you fear. So when I was packing across areas that were dry, I feared dehydration, another story. I'd pack a ton of water. The other thing that I have a total fear of is high heights, especially in areas where you might fall off. And there was this there's this place on the trail where you go, Forester Pass, which is at 13,000 plus feet, and that was the highest point that caused me some anxiety. I heard about high altitude pulmonary edema and learned all about it, and it's frightening, you know, because it can happen to anybody at any time. There was snow that had hit us. Some squall came up through Mexico and dumped a bunch of snow, and a lot of people had gone off trail to hike around this or hitchhike around it. So I wanted to learn everything that there was to learn about this part of the trail so I could be ready for it. And I got off at a town called Lone Pine and asked the pros there at a supply shop, you know, what are the conditions on top of Forester? And I got to show you this. They said, well, you should go to YouTube and listen to what Captain Dan has to say. Captain Dan, also the old man, was posting on YouTube his exploits on the trail, and he had just passed Forester several days before I was going to do it, and he had posted this thing. I'm going to show it to you because it'll really give you, I think, a view of what the trail looks like. Let's see if I can get this going. Captain Dan.
Heading up to Forester Pass. The sun's up. I left an hour early, and curious to see how this goes. I'm at 12,200 feet, so I have another 1,100 feet up to go.
That's a lake.
Okay, where's the pass?
That's the young kid. She said, fuck yeah.
No way! Look how steep that is. Is there an elevator? I found Forester Pass. And it's there. Somehow, we've got a bunch of switchbacks. And then we got to climb up into that. Geez, I don't see any trail. At some point, I need to put on my ice spikes. May not be very far from that point. I'll have better footing now. I wasn't paying any attention. I was just trying to get through that deep snow over there, and that was the dangerous spot where you have to get across so you don't slide down. Where? You think the trail goes straight? Shit. Look at that. Then go up from here. All right. Let's move on. It's a bummer to get this far and there's no trail. Okay. So, what time is it? 9:15. Thank you, Lord. 9:15, and I made it through Forester Pass.
That totally freaked me out. I was ready to get off, but I did it, and actually, I mean, it turned out, as is usually the case, you know, that it was not as bad as it seemed to have been on that film. Actually, I'd say that the hardest part of the trail, for those of you who might do this, was actually just being separated from the family. I knew that was going to happen, but I didn't realize exactly how hard that would be. But I tried to stay in touch by phone, but there were some places along the trail where the phone just would not work. AT&T, we got to, glibly call it at the top, because sometimes, but not usually at the top of a mountain, it would sometimes work. Sometimes people would put rocks on the trail saying, if you stand just here, you will get a signal, right? But there were lots of times where there was no signal whatsoever. I bought a satellite phone where if you stand just right and 3 satellites would simultaneously see you between the trees and the mountains and such, you might get a signal for 20 seconds maybe, Karen's shaking her head, yes. So that was not satisfactory. I mean, I did, so that it can happen, have a lot of fun in August. Yes, this is true for those of you who didn't know that I was here. Come down for a family reunion. It was my daughter Emma's on the well, you can't really see it. This is not a great picture. It was my daughter Emma's birthday, and I came down and I surprised her at the Shiva Lounge, which is over at Fillmore. I was wearing a dinosaur onesie and a squid hat, so she wouldn't recognize who I was. It totally freaked her out. I don't think she would have recognized me. That's me without the squid hat on. I didn't really recognize me so much. But so there were ways to get around this hardship, but it's something that you have to think about if you want to do it. I'm going to close, okay? We're almost done here. So what did I learn? I think this is, you know, a small part of what I learned, but the most important parts. I think the thing that I thought was most important was that I could live a very simple life and be totally satisfied. And, you know, this was with just walking and eating and sleeping and having a very few number of possessions, and it was just fantastic. I have always loved nature, but I've never immersed myself in it to the extent that I did during the course of this trail. And its beauty and diversity is something that you need to see because it is totally magical. And this is something next that I never really thought about much, but which you need to think about. I mean, I've been all places over the world, and there were people from all over the world who were on the trail. But each day I would wake myself up and realize I was just so fortunate, not just to be able to physically do this, but to do it, to have the freedom to walk and do something as magnificent and as enriching as this. And this is something that I think is, you know, 2,000 people, right, a spike of walkers on this trail that's 2,600 miles long. Nobody is walking this magnificent work of art. And you all have the freedom, I think, to do it. I've tried to bring some of this back home. One thing that I'm doing is simplifying my life, so I have discarded many committee roles and board functions and other stuff. The only thing that I've agreed to do that's new is to help Sue Carlisle, again, my beloved dean at San Francisco General, to work and help her chair a committee to build a new research building, which is, I think, consistent with the second thing that I'm really focusing on, which is my family and my research. If that thing that I'm being asked to do doesn't really fit into those two buckets, it's unlikely that I will do it. And then the other thing that this has given me great confidence to do, which I've done in the past with some amount of vigor, but never with the amount that I have now, is to make plans for future adventures. Be forewarned. KK. I'll close. I want to play this for you. Okay, so Hafslo, at one point in the trail in Southern Oregon, at a hiker heaven that was run by a guy named Shrek, actually told me that he had written a poem for me, which I thought was great. And he didn't really write it, but he took it from Anna Quinlan, and he adapted it to the hiker. And it's for all of us, I think. I'm going to play it so you can hear it. And I think it's as I said, he's the wise guru. And it's here.
Get a life.
Get a life. Get a life.
Don't confuse the two. Your life and your work. The second is only part of the first. You cannot be really first rate at your work if your work is all you have. So, get a life, a real life, not a manic pursuit of the next promotion or the bigger paycheck or a larger house. Get a life in which you notice the smell of salt water pushing itself on a breeze over the dunes. Get a life that you can take 6 months off to reset your button on the PCT. Get a life in which you stop and watch how a red-tailed hawk circle over a pond and a stand of pines. Get a life in which you pay attention to a baby as she scowls with concentration when she tries to pick up the Cheerios with her thumb and her first finger. Get a life in which you are not alone. Find the people you love and who love you. And remember, love is not leisure, it is work. Get a life in which you are generous. Look around and see how the azalea making fusion star-crossed in the spring, and look at the full moon hanging silver in a black sky on a cold night. Get a life that you can realize life is glorious and that you have no business taking it for granted. Get a life that you not only do well, but you also do good, because doing well without doing good is never enough. For Smokey 2015.
Wise words from a wise man in a somewhat lighter moment. I'm going to stop here. I'm a little bit over. I'm sorry. I'm happy to talk to anybody at any time at great length. So just talk to me.
Well, you know, for people who need to leave, but we do have the room. And so if it's okay, folks who want to stay, questions.
Happy to answer questions.
Please.
So in terms of your electronic devices, you took your cell phone and you took a laptop?
I had a laptop on which I put all the music that Kevin gave me, and that laptop went into a box which was bounced from one supply point to another. So I didn't carry it, but I did carry a Nano so I could listen to all the music. And I had this reader, the Kobo reader it's called. And you might ask, how did I power it? Very unsuccessfully in the beginning. I finally learned that it was better to carry a battery pack along the way rather than a solar panel, because the packs could always be charged and the panel sometimes didn't see solar. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other?
Oh yeah, hi.
One pair of boots last year.
One pair of boots. First I wore track shoes, the very same shoe type that I started to wear when I was 13 or 14 years old, to which my foot had become very accustomed. And consequently, I didn't get many blisters, actually. But they were made of rubber and soft mesh at the top, and they would fall apart quite readily. So I went through about 4 pairs of those. I was going to show some pictures of them, but they really looked bad. But yeah, most people are not wearing boots. You could readily tll somebody who was not a through hiker, because they would be walking through with these 60-pound packs and boots. And most everybody else was wearing relatively light shoes, some with a little bit of ankle support, mostly without.
And you just had it shipped to you when you needed them?
Yeah. Actually, I had planned to run out, and I had them shipped in my supply boxes. But believe it or not, you can actually, go online on your iPhone 5S and ask Amazon to deliver. We joke about how there'll probably be drones coming into the PCT at some point, delivering new shoes and whatever else you need. Yeah.
How many days or miles between resupply stops?
Good question. I had planned in the beginning when I made the boxes for there to be about 5 to 10 days between resupply, and I had mapped out which resupply towns to which I would go. Some are right on the trail, some require a hitch. Sometimes a mile, sometimes more. I found ultimately that was too far for me. That I did not want to carry, the way that I was, the amount of food it would take to go 10 days without a resupply, and that the right resupply for me was between 3 and 7 days. And every hiker will find their own magic spot. And as I think I said, it took me almost 2,600 miles to figure out that part of it. But there are places along the trail, except in the place where the JMT is, where you can get off the trail every 3 to 7 days pretty easily. Yeah.
Did you find that the water report was accurate?
Yeah. The water report is a godsend, and it's updated every month, and it was generally accurate. But there was a communication stream up and down the trail. There were not many so-called southbound hikers, but there would often be day hikers, section hikers, etc., coming southbound that we would meet, and you could validate that the water report for the upcoming water hole was correct by asking them, is there water in them that are apart? So it was pretty good, and it's fantastic that the community who updates it. It's the community that updates it, that feeds it back to the PCT, and then they send it out as an updated report. So it's really good to have.
And just to tie into that, you quickly went over this, but can you just describe for everybody magic? Because I remember I was with you and with Hapslow, and both of them suddenly said, "Oh, magic!" and they pointed to this. What was that all about?
So trail magic has evolved over the years to a point where there's some controversy associated with it now, but it generally is. It reflects what you learn to love as the goodness of people, and there are people up and down the trail who have decided to take it upon themselves to leave stuff. Sometimes they'll leave a container of ice full of beer or soft drinks or sausage and cheese and things like that. Sometimes they'll open up their house and allow you to stay there overnight and take a shower. Sometimes they'll create these enclaves, incredible enclaves. There's one in I think it was Oregon, where we ran across, unexpectedly, this place in the woods where there was a table with food on the table. There was a ice chest behind the table full of food. There was a grill with a propane tank on which you could cook the food that was in. There was a cabinet that you could open, looked like Safeway, that had cans of stuff. There was a solar panel heated shower where you could go and take a shower that was hot. And then, not least, you remember this place, there was this generator that was making electricity that you could use to power the battery that was running out so your iPhone would work. That's magic. And it's controversial because the food attracts animals and allows them to be accustomed to food in a place where it shouldn't be. The presence of magic can sometimes give people the confidence that they'll actually be able to walk without water to a place where there will be water, and they find then when they get there that there isn't water, and they're in trouble. And some other stuff. By and large, I loved it. And I think you saw some of it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I know you packed pretty light, but was there anything you started with that you then dropped later besides the food? And is there anything in retrospect that you wished you hadn't brought on the trip, particularly with respect to electronics?
Yeah, that's a good question. There was a lot of stuff that I had in the beginning that I didn't need and jettisoned. A lot of it was small. For instance, Charlie told me if I had a toothbrush that I didn't need the handle, and I thought that was stupid. But then later, like him, I cracked off the handle because I didn't need the handle. And there was all this other stuff that I had, ointments. I'd have a 1 ounce thing of ointment for, a rash. You didn't need an ounce. I'd squeeze out half an ounce, and that would be the tube. I didn't need a bear canister. I was told that I would, but these black bears are more afraid of us, right, than us of them. So that bear canister got jettisoned. I had an ice pick because I thought I was going to fall off a mountain, right? That got jettisoned. Clothing, initially I had all sorts of clothing that I thought I would wear. It's true. I eventually had 1 pair of pants, 1 pair of underpants, and 1 shirt. And that's what I wore. I guess that's what I do now. I'm just thinking about it. Yeah, it's true. And so on. There was... so the pack with bits and pieces of whittling went down, like I said, from about 30, 35 pounds to 20, 25. Was there anything that I wished I'd had? No. I mean, I had everything I needed. Yeah, hi.
What was the longest stretch that without water? How much water?
Yeah, good question. There were 2 long stretches, each of about 40 plus miles, one in Southern California, one in Northern California. And there was nothing in between. The first, there turned out to be a water catch on Route 22, which was humorously called Catch 22, which again was one of these places where there may or may not have been water. As it turned out, there was. And so those required, if you figure you need, a liter per every 5 miles, 40 miles is 8 liters. You can do the math. That's a lot of carrying of water. And like I said, some people were more facile about it or less worried about it than was I. I actually had a situation once with my family where I became dehydrated and lost, my sensorium or whatever you do neurologically when you become, all that stuff happened to me. So I carried water. It was worth it.
Maybe one last. You had a question? Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to know, you keep referring to we would do this, we would do that. Was there somebody that you were with, that you left with, or?
Good question, yeah. No, I walked alone, and I did that intentionally because I don't think, frankly, there's anybody that would ever want to walk 2,600 miles with me. and yet I was never alone. We would always hopscotch over with other people during the time. As I moved into the northern part of the trail, I actually did see people and walked with people for long stretches, and it became a literal we. But I think in most cases, even then, people were walking, and they were walking in parallel and talking, and then stopping mostly for talk and a lot of interaction.
And one other question, you mentioned that you fell that one time and scraped your head. Were there any other injuries or times where you were by yourself and you hurt yourself and you're like stuck or scared or?
Yeah, I had one other time when I was in northern Washington State, and I was coming down to the northern terminus, actually, and it had snowed the night before. And it was like the first time that I mentioned the nub on the log that I tripped over. It was really excited to get to the halfway mark, and I was not paying attention, and I hit that nub. And in a similar manner, as I was heading down to the northern terminus, I was excited to get down there, and I was walking on the snow, and I hit a point where I actually fell off the side of the trail. I did this really artistic loop-de-loop with my body on the trail. And I didn't hurt myself, but the consequence was that the tent that I had, which per Dan's advice, I had tied to the top of my backpack so that it would dry out, because it had a lot of snow on it from the night before, flipped also in a very artistic way, like 10 yards off the trail, and I didn't notice it. Meaning to say that when I finally finished in Canada, I had to walk back which was okay, believe me. I was not really ready to end. I had to walk back for another 8 miles or more to find that stupid tent. But I was physically fine. One more? Okay.
Sure.
I'm here to answer questions all along. I'm sorry. Okay.
What's on your bucket list?
Good question. Well, actually, this summer I'm taking KK out to Washington State to one of the most beautiful and accessible parts of the trail, which is near Lake. It's in Lake Chelan, a town called Stehekin, and we're going to go there and we're going to hike. And I'm thrilled that my daughter Emma wants to do the PCT, not this coming summer, but 2 summers from now, and I'll be walking parts of that and helping to support her. I'm too embarrassed to talk about the other buckets on the bucket list, but if you grab me sometime in a corner, I'll let you know. Yes, ma'am?
That was the same question I was going to ask.
Yeah. There's lots of great buckets I can tell you about.
Well, first off, again, just want to thank Josipa and Brenda G, who did all the organizing for this. Josipa, thank you, right up there. And I don't need to belabor this. I think everyone is incredibly thankful for sharing this story. Just like you are, Mike, thoughtful and inspiring, and I think most of all, just plain enlightening. So thank you.
Thank you.